Otaku no Video. As always, thank you very much for joining me. For this video, digging deeper into the original Mobile Suit Gundam, the themes, remarkable moments, and things like that. This is the first part of several, because I'm going to cover quite a lot of ground in these videos. And I want to start off by talking about the overall themes of Mobile Suit Gundam. There are a number of them, but I want to touch on some of the major ones. The first one being responsibility. I mean, really, you see this in terms of how Amuro has to use this Gundam and what he's expected to do. Now, Asia and Asian folks in general have kind of a different view of responsibility than Western society has. Or let me rephrase that. Eastern culture has generally had a different view of responsibility than Western culture has, over the course of many years. And we see that very much in Gundam. Amuro climbs into the Gundam out of pure self-preservation. He's just trying to survive. And ends up with these skills. He ends up as the only person who's ever piloted the Gundam. And so he's brought onto White Base and he has to pilot it. Well, the message of that very clearly is that he has to pilot the Gundam. It is his responsibility now to pilot the Gundam. His choices don't really matter at that point. And that's different than the way a lot of Western stories would present it. We have a view of personal freedom that says, whatever your skills are, you still need to find, the right thing to do. And if you're not if you may have the skills, but you may decide not to do it, you have to find somebody else to do it. The message in Gundam is very much, if you have these skills, you need to use them for the good of society. It's quite interesting. And that weaves into the overall theme of growing up. And the fact that all of these characters have that experience in some way. Bright has it, Kai and Hayato have it, certainly, where they kind of don't want to be part of this, but they realize they kind of have to. And that weaves into this whole idea that in most mecha series, the giant robot can be seen as a metaphor for growing up. You have a kid going through adolescence. He gets in this giant robot, which gives him all these powers. And he then learns the consequences of using those powers. And we see that in Gundam, where, it's no accident, I think, that Amuro is 15 years old when he gets the Gundam. That's the same age, roughly, when you start being able to drive, start being able to get a part-time job. You start entering the adult world in a very concrete, everyday way that isn't a continuation from things you did previously. Yes, you're entering junior high and high school, and you're starting to get these harder tasks and things like that. And you're starting to do things more like what they would be in the business world, for example. But it's a continuation of school. Getting a job and things like that are more like that adult world. And you're trying to really, interact with that adult world. And that's when Amuro gets the Gundam, and that's when he starts getting these powers. Children are so powerless. And now he's able to do these things and fight in this war, and it's very traumatic. And through that, he learns of the consequences of that power. The fact that power can be used for good. It can have very terrible consequences, as we see with Lala. And that's not saying anything about that power. The Gundam is not good or evil. It is how it is used. Very important thing. And so we see the characters grow up. I mean, it's really remarkable going back to the first episode of Gundam and seeing how Amuro is completely absorbed in his electronics, completely self-absorbed. He's not feeding himself. He's ignoring Frau Bo. And he's just totally geeking out with this thing, and in a way that's just very self-absorbed. And by the end of the series, he has much greater awareness of his surroundings, the people around him and the responsibilities of everyone around him, and what needs to be done. And that self-absorption has been mostly wiped away as a result of all the things he's been through. And it's a very different person at that point, a much more integrated person, a much more aware person. It's a good thing. And Amuro starts out very, very different from that. And it's neat seeing how completely Gundam does that. Another actually interesting aspect of it is Gundam has some of the most subtle character development and some of the most subtle overall character development I've ever seen in an anime, in the sense that characters are very different at the end of the story than they are at the beginning of the story, and there are very few, there effectively no, changeover moments. A character doesn't go through some traumatic experience and changes them. Infinite Rebias, a series that is extremely impressive in a lot of ways, tends to do that, where you'll have characters who will go along in one way, have a traumatic experience, and that changes them. And that's realistic too. But in Gundam, you see this very slow progression of characters changing and shifting over the course of time. It's very natural, very realistic. And I just love it. It's very impressive, and you see that happening for many characters. It happens to Amuro, Kai, Hayato, Bright, Mirai. They all shift in various ways over the course of the series, so that the Bright, as of the end of the series, is a very different captain than he is in episodes 2 and 3. And that's awesome. Now, they're going through all these traumatic experiences, and that is really illustrating one of the major themes of Gundam, and that is that war makes you crazy. And I want to give a shout out to my friend Eric for pointing this out, that it's one of the major themes of Gundam in general, across all the different shows in the franchise, that war and fighting and so forth can drive you mad, and that you see a lot of people on both sides of the conflict that are really driven crazy by this. You certainly see it in the Zabis. And you see it in other folks on the other side of the fence, actually. Remember the scene or the sequence where Amuro goes back to his home, trying to find his mother, and there are a bunch of Fedis in his house having a very wild party, hinted at being an orgy, in his house. And it's a very violating thing. And it's shocking. And these are the good guys, if you will. And that's actually another neat thing, just to go off on a quick tangent, about Gundam, is how, again, up to this point, good guys and bad guys in anime were very clearly delineated. Bad guys were crooks, they were evil, they were xenophobes, they were racist, whatever. In Gundam, for possibly the first time in anime, the bad guys could be very sympathetic. Heck, Char is a bad guy, and you're rooting for him throughout most of the series. So the creators do a lot of work there, and there's a lot there to make you sympathize with the bad guys, and understanding that they're on the other side of the war. They went in for their own reasons, whatever, but a lot of these frontline soldiers, a lot of these just general people, they're there because they got drafted, or they're there because they volunteered because they want independence for the colonies. And you understand that, and you feel for them. And so you see that it's not the simple good, bad, evil thing. So you see how war can twist your psyche, twist your morals in a lot of ways. And you do things that you would not do outside of war, inside of a war. And getting back to that theme, that the tools you're provided with are not in of themselves good and bad, but they give you options. Some of those options are very dangerous, and you have to be careful about what you do with yourself, what you do with those tools, now that you have this very different tool set to work with. There's another neat thing, is that yes, war can make you evil or crazy, but there are plenty of crazy people outside of war. Giran Zabi would be a psychopath and would be this evil, manipulating schemer, even if there was no war. There's no question there. Now, one of the other major remarkable things about Mobile Suit Gundam in general was its very realistic approach to its universe. Up until this point, generally speaking, the science was, let's just say, very loosely handled. And the science is very much thought out in Mobile Suit Gundam. It feels like a real world. And actually, that gets into one of the interesting things is, well, we'll get back to that in a second. In most science fiction universes, in order to explain things like interstellar travel or interstellar communication or whatever, you need some kind of magic technology, something that was invented or discovered at some point, which enables some of these things, which we know we just kind of can't get to just yet. And in Gundam, of course, it's Minovsky particles. And I want to give them credit for the fact that Minovsky particles are a brilliant solution to several problems at once. It allows for compact fusion reactors, so you can have mobile suits and things like that. There's also the idea that Minovsky particles as part of normal operations, but also you can kind of just do this explicitly. If you disperse Minovsky particles, it jams radar. There's been this long-standing debate and discussion within the science fiction community for decades about the question of, in a space battle, why don't you just park yourself a mile away from your target and fire lasers and missiles at it? There's no reason to get in close and engage. And if they launch fighters or mobile suits or what have you, you'll see them coming from a mile away, literally, and you can just shoot them down. You have plenty of time to shoot them down, even if they can fly real fast, whatever. So you can say, a parsec away from your target. That's a bit of an exaggeration. But a long distance and just fire at them. And now a lot of science fiction resolves that by doing things like in Star Wars, the idea is that blasters and other energy weapons are inaccurate. And so, if you did that, you just miss, frankly. Star Trek, I've never quite understood that, to be honest. Maybe there's some explanation of phase modulation. Maybe phasers aren't as powerful 10 miles away. I don't know. Anyway, so there's that, big question. And that's what Minovsky particles were created to resolve in Gundam. That because of Minovsky particles, and because, and again, this gets back into working into the story, if you have a military that has Minovsky particles that can jam radar, the first thing they're going to do is disperse Minovsky particles around every research lab, and then realize that if they do that, well, that advertises that there's a research lab there, because, anywhere there's dense Minovsky particles, it's probably a research lab. So they'll broadcast them in other places, and it will quickly become this fog of war thing. And so that's what it is. So with Minovsky particles, you have to get in close and fight really, really close in combat. And again, the idea that not only does it because it messes up radar, it also messes up missiles. You stay a long way away, you fire a laser, it's probably not going to hit because the guidance systems aren't going to figure it out. The ship won't be where you think it is, and the little targeting things on the missiles are not going to be able to see it because they'll wind all over the place with Minovsky particles. So a brilliant solution to that problem and that question. Also, one of the interesting things is that Minovsky particles allows you to do compact fusion reactors, but they don't let you do interstellar travel. Gundam is set within the Earth's sphere. It's not going to other planets, other star systems. Mars is still a long way away, relatively speaking. But you can travel between Earth and Lagrange points and so forth at reasonable speeds. It's a really interesting direction to take. Again, a very realistic approach to it. And that brings up the overall universe of Mobile Suit Gundam. In Mecha series up to this point, they were all set on Earth, basically, or another world or whatever. But there usually was not a space component to those worlds. And now, in Universal Century, space is a habitat, but it's also still a frontier. And you see this in how people react to the idea of going up the colony towards the docking bay. People don't really like to do that on colonies. Space is still a little scary to people in the Universal Century. It's a part of everyday life, but it's something that makes folks a little bit uncomfortable still. And that's a very interesting, important thing. For a lot of people, they have that issue. It's a lot like the sea 100, 200 years ago. Yes, it's a part of everyday life. There's lots of ships going back and forth. But it's also a part of everyday life that sailors don't come back. It's still this very dangerous place. And Universal Century and Gundam was able to capture that with its world. Moreover, you get this feeling that Universal Century is very big. There's so many stories going on. Yes, Amuro and White Base and the Gundam are central to the war. But there's so many other stuff going on in the war, and so many other stuff going on in the world and in the universe beyond the war. Not only could you write fanfic about this, you could write novels about other stuff going on during the story of Mobile Suit Gundam. When you think of a show like Evangelion, for example, those characters and those situations are really what's going on in the world. That's really the primary story. Yes, you could write stories about some of the other side things going on, but that's really the core. You can't really go too far off of Shinji and the other characters without sort of running out of world. And that's what Evangelion is trying to do. That's not a complaint. That's just the structure of it. But Gundam feels big, and I love that for its ability to create this huge, huge world to imaginatively play in. It's something that makes it really easy to imagine what's going on and to imagine other stories and so forth. It's really, really brilliant. And I keep mentioning previous mecha series because that is one of the key points here. Gundam is revolutionary. Gundam was different from what had come before. It marked the point where suddenly anime was attacking these more serious issues and being more realistic. It wasn't just goofy stuff for kids anymore. So stay tuned for the second part of this video series where I'll be talking about some of the more remarkable moments in Mobile Suit Gundam, talking about their themes, the deeper elements thereof, why they're there, what they mean for the characters, and what they mean for the rest of us. So stay tuned.